Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching WION-VOA Co-Production with me, Molly Gambhir. Our top focus in this edition is the virtual summit that took place between US President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping earlier this week. The United States and China have agreed to continue dialogue on managing strategic stability on issues like Taiwan, nuclear arms control and cybersecurity. But as Voice of America White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara reports, the fundamentally contentious nature of the US-China relationship is unlikely to change. Take a look.
The US-China relationship is rife with differences, but there is one thing their leaders agree on. The two sides need to continue talking.
Our responsibility as leaders of China and the United States is to ensure that the competition between our countries does not veer into conflict, whether intended or unintended. Just simple, straightforward competition.
China and the U.S. need to increase communication and cooperation, each run their domestic affairs well, and at the same time shoulder their share of international responsibilities.
While the tone of the Monday virtual meeting between President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping was cordial, analysts say it does not change the fundamentally contentious nature of the relationship.
But like a married couple going to therapy, in which neither is really trying to fix or change the marriage, but each instead is trying to convince the counselor to take his or her side and to gang up against the other.
The most sensitive issue in this troubled relationship is Taiwan. Biden said the U.S. remains committed to the One China policy, but strongly opposes unilateral efforts to change the status quo of the island that is now a separate governing entity from mainland China. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan.
Ensuring peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, having clear communication, avoiding miscommunication is going to be an important and intensive aspect of work between our militaries, between our national security councils, and between our diplomats.
Following the summit, China's foreign ministry warned Taiwan secessionists not to provoke Beijing.
On issues concerning China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, China does not have any room for compromise.
Biden and Xi agreed to establish a strategic stability dialogue on other sensitive issues, such as military capability, nuclear arms control, and cybersecurity. Both sides have an interest in keeping the relationship stable. The U.S. will hold midterm elections in 2022, while Xi and the Chinese Communist Party also have important events ahead.
Which he wants domestic stability, he wants a relatively stable international environment to make sure that the Olympics goes well, as well as the 20-party Congress goes well.
China is expected to continue its military activities in the Western Pacific, which Washington views as provocation, while Beijing will be bracing for the upcoming Summit for Democracy hosted by Biden in December.
That is not only about China, of course, it's also about growing authoritarianism in Europe, but it will be experienced by China as a thorn in its side. And the Biden administration will also be announcing soon its new Indo-Pacific strategy, which will be China-centric, and it will be completing its review of China policies.
Possible areas of cooperation between U.S. and China, working together to reduce emissions and tackle the climate crisis, and to end the global COVID-19 pandemic sooner. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
And to speak about this further, joining us is Voice of America correspondent Chris Casqueo from Washington. Hi, Chris. China is expected to continue its military moves, and that is just one of the many points of contention in the complicated US-China relationship. Which areas would particularly be in focus after this summit as the countries move forward?
Good morning from Washington, Molly. Let's focus on a few areas: military capability, North Korea, Taiwan, and the South China Sea. The second highest ranking general in the U.S. said this week that China's hypersonic missile test over the summer was a very significant capability that has the potential to change a lot of things. China's medium-range hypersonic missile missed its target by several kilometers, but it was the first time any country sent a hypersonic missile fully around the Earth. The U.S. is several years away from similar capability. Regarding North Korea, experts say China will use the country as leverage to challenge Washington on several issues, including the U.S. goal to denuclearize the Korean peninsula. Analysts say China does not view North Korea's nuclear weapons as an asset, but rather China seems happy to exploit North Korea's existence to divert attention from itself and keep the U.S. busy with multiple challenges. On Taiwan, senior U.S. officials said during the virtual meeting, U.S. President Biden was quite direct about his concerns about some of Beijing's behavior that he believes is at odds with the peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. And earlier this week, China Coast Guard ships blocked and used water cannons on 2 Philippine supply boats in disputed South China Sea waters. President Biden has repeatedly assured the Philippines that the U.S. will honor its obligation under the Two Nations Mutual Defense Treaty if Philippine forces, ships, or aircraft come under attack in the long disputed waters. Back to you.
Indeed. Chris, China's disputes with America even extend into the entertainment sector. China has been making patriotic movies for its domestic audiences while tightening control over its film industry. Developments that have left Hollywood wondering whether its movies will still be welcome in China's lucrative market. How is the American movie industry responding to this?
Well, U.S.-based Netflix and other studios are now looking at other markets outside of China, such as countries in Southeast Asia, Latin America, and smaller countries in Europe. A veteran Hollywood executive says Beijing bans any movies that flaunt the gap between rich and poor or highlight aspirational democracy. And that has led to a steady decline of Hollywood movies allowed to be released in China. Filmmakers also note that movies with themes like self-exploration don't make it past censors. But experts say Hollywood and China still need each other. China needs Hollywood movies to remain the largest film market in the world. U.S. studios need the Chinese market to make their money back on large-budget blockbuster films. Molly?
Right. Stay with me, Chris. Let's also take our viewers through this special report that we have. The UN World Food Programme has warned that years of conflict and a prolonged drought threaten close to half of Afghanistan's estimated population of 40 million people with starvation this winter. With the severe humanitarian crisis ravaging the country, hospitals are reporting an increase in the number of young children suffering from acute malnourishment. For Voice of America, Gaha Pellegrini reports from Kandahar.
This is Dr. Mohammed Sadiq, pediatrician for the past 38 years at the Midwise Hospital in Kandahar. The hospital is a regional hub and supported by the International Committee of the Red Cross. Dr. Sadiq says the hospital is seeing an increasing number of children under 5 years old who are suffering from acute malnutrition.
If I compare with last 3 months, this month when I was preparing my report, it was double. So it means that 100% it is increase in the number of the admission.
Sadiq says with the Taliban in control, fighting in the rural areas has subsided, and more people are able to make it into the city to get medical care.
Now everybody have access to come to the town. Before maybe also there were some malnutrition patients in those areas, but they could not reach us. But now everybody can reach us, so that's why the number is increasing day by day.
According to the World Food Programme, nearly 19 million Afghans are at risk of suffering from acute malnourishment and hunger this winter, and it says an estimated 3 million children are most at risk. Dr. Sadiq notes the prevalence of such cases among the youngest, children less than 5 years old.
Before she had fever, she's admitted here since 2 days, and now it is deducted that she has anemia also, and she has a malnutrition also. Yes, she's very happy from the staff because they are providing very good services.
With the current food emergency and the number of patients less than 5 years old doubling, the medical staff is overwhelmed. Also, they have not been paid for months. Despite international humanitarian aid pledges, a report by Human Rights Watch says Afghanistan must do more to confront the core reasons behind this humanitarian catastrophe. Gaia Pellegrini Bertoli for VOA News, Kandahar.
And going back across now to VOA correspondent Chris Casqueo with us from Washington. Chris, concerns persist that Afghanistan's humanitarian crisis could transform into a refugee crisis, and the Taliban is saying that America could help alleviate the crisis. What exactly is the Taliban calling for?
Well, the Taliban foreign minister on Wednesday wrote an open letter to the U.S. Congress calling on the U.S. to unblock more than $9 billion in Afghan central bank assets and end other financial sanctions against the country. He warned that the economic troubles and humanitarian crisis could lead to a mass refugee exodus. Washington and Europe have blocked Kabul's access to Afghan central bank assets, largely held in the U.S. Federal Reserve after the Islamist Taliban takeover in Afghanistan last August. The World Bank and International Monetary Fund also have suspended about $1.2 billion in aid money they were supposed to release for Afghanistan this year. The Taliban are struggling to pay doctors, teachers, and other government employees. The United Nations and other aid groups are also finding it challenging to pay their staff and sustain Afghan relief efforts due to the international sanctions. The U.S. has thus far not shown any willingness to unfreeze the assets unless the Taliban keeps its promises to uphold women's and minority groups' rights. Molly?
Right, and the increased sectarian violence since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan is proving particularly dangerous for journalists. What can you tell us about that?
A well-known Afghan TV journalist is the latest victim of violence. Hamid Saigani was killed in a suspected bomb blast on a minibus in Kabul. An independent media monitor noted that Saigani was at least the 9th journalist killed in Afghanistan this year. It's not known whether Saigani was the intended target of the blast, which injured several others. There were no immediate claims of responsibility for the attack, but Afghanistan Shiite Hazara minority have for years been the target of deadly violence by the regional Islamic State affiliate known as ISIS-K. Data from another media watch group says at least 67 journalists were killed in Afghanistan between 2013 and 2020, for which the Taliban is listed as responsible for 27 cases. Molly?
Chris Casqueo with us from Washington. Thanks very much once again for sharing those inputs and perspectives. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of WION-VOA Co-Production.